I will do one little connection to Nina's story, which is that I think we had the same grandmother. And I do want to start out with a little story about that. Can you see this bracelet? It's my favorite. I call it my Wonder Woman bracelet. It's actually, I don't know how much longer I'll be able to keep, it's very skinny, so I like stop bullets with it. When I graduated from college, I went to see my grandmother in Shawano, Wisconsin, and she said, well, I picked out a lapel pin for you down at the jewelry store, so go walk downtown and go pick it up. And I walked down and I looked at it and I was like, what's a lapel? I don't know. And I walked back, I was like, Grandma, it's really nice. I don't own a lapel. I don't know when I would wear this. And now I do, actually. I probably would. She said, well, what do you want? And I said, well, I want that beautiful bracelet of yours that is made up of melted down silver dollars and turquoise from when she was a nurse on a horseback riding trip for women across the Navajo territories in Arizona in the 1920s. That's Grandma. She said, that's too good for you. Did we have the same grandmother? Yeah. I was like, okay. But by the end of that weekend, I was up there and we did things like, watch the news together and watch Gigi and old movies and talk and go for walks. And she would tell me all these stories of growing up on a ranch in Montana. And I just understood. I relished her company. And she gave me, as you can tell, gave me the bracelet. So fast forward a couple of years later, I went up to go visit her, and she had had a stroke that had completely taken her ability to read. She was a voracious reader. She could no longer tell stories. She couldn't speak. She did manage to torture the poor people who cared for her in her home by turning down the heat to incredibly low, drove them crazy. And eventually she needed more care and was in a nursing home. She actually she was the managing night nurse at the Northwestern Hospital down here. She at 18 got on a train from Montana to Chicago and went to nursing school, and then ended up getting swept off her feet by a country doctor and taken up to Shawano, which she told everybody she was from Chicago. Lots and lots of family stories that I have that I learned very quickly that I could engage. That storytelling is a shared act. She taught me that in the nursing home when I went to visit her, and she only had a sound. She could make the sound tss, 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 and then she could kind of point her finger. And I would have to start out by saying, okay, is it someone outside of this building or inside the building? Outside the building. Okay. Is it someone in town or out of town? Okay, out of town. She would guide me with her sound and her finger. And about 45 minutes later, I would end up with a very specific piece of information. In this case, it was that I was to go to the bottom desk drawer in her house and get an envelope that had a return address that would tell me how to contact a cousin of mine who was a clinical psychologist, which is what she thought I should be. Enough of this arts crap. You need a real career. That was Grandma, who even without the ability to speak or read or anything could boss me around. It really also taught me that story is in between people. And that is a little bit of the work that I've done since then. And since then also finding myself on a locked unit of an Alzheimer's wing where I found that story based on reminiscence and tell me a little bit about who you were and what you used to do really bred more shame than engagement. And I had to come up with a way to invite the person and for me to be in the present moment, even though that present moment was hard, a hard place to be. And I found this thing called improvisation, which I knew about. I just had never done it on a locked Alzheimer's unit. And that 28 years ago was the beginning of a career. And I don't think I would have gotten there without Grandma bossing me with her finger and me realizing that story actually is shaped. It's really a creative act to invite someone into story and to listen. Boy, Nina, you are such a good active listener. It was a master class in watching the facilitation as well as the stories that came out. Just incredibly beautiful. So a little bit of what I'm going to do today is walk you through what I call the building of the creative confidence in all of us as natural storytellers and facilitators of story and why we do that. That's the first thing I hear. Oh, but I'm not creative. But when I hear that, and who here thinks they struggle with being creative? Anybody? Yeah. Yeah. So I like to say, who here is breathing? Anybody? Anybody breathing? We're all creative. It is actually one of the attributes that makes us uniquely human, that human beings are a creative species. We can actually imagine the future, which is what creativity is. Imagining something that isn't there, that is something we can do. And the modes of expression of it are varied in range. I would say there's a few more than 4 ways of doing it. Being in the theater, did not seeing that up there in the top 4, but I think that there's myriad and almost endless possibilities for creative expression. The arts are actually something that I like to say is really super helpful. It's just an emotional and symbolic language. That is all it is. It's learning to express inside of an emotional and symbolic language. So when I hear I'm not creative, I actually hear I'm in a routine that doesn't feel creative. Or to me, creativity is for professional artists, right? That's what I assume creativity is, and I'm not a professional artist, so therefore I'm not creative. Or care work is hard. I don't have time for that. As though it's separate and it's not embedded in every single action that a caregiver takes or that a human being takes. I'm too stressed to feel creative, as though somehow creativity is the opposite. And I think Dr. Noble's talk, you understood that creativity is the solution to reduce stress. So it's sort of one of those or chasing the tail. So again, every human being is creative. It's how we unlock it that is the challenge. So in this picture, I like to say, if you asked someone, do you want to do an art project with me? What would be the first response? What is it? No. And I learned this because I've done a lot of large-scale creative projects in care settings, so like congregate care settings, assisted living, skilled care. The Penelope book that was mentioned really came from a multi-year project in a long-term care community to reimagine Homer's Odyssey from the perspective of his wife Penelope in all levels of care together. So a skilled care, assisted, independent, and adult day, because that 1 mile long, like acreage, huge long-term care community had never collaborated on anything. They were operating like separate little planets in the solar system. So I had to learn. There I could say, do you want to do an art project? And people would say, sure, we'll put it in the activity programming. It'll make sense there, right? But when we were trying to do this with older people living at home alone, do you want to do an art project? Nope. And they could say no, and they should say no, because who's this weird artist asking them to do an art project, right? But instead, I learned to ask, I have a beautiful question. Do you want to hear it? What do you say to that? Oh, yeah, what the heck is a beautiful question? I can answer a question. And the question becomes the way, the art of facilitation to invite someone to express and share with you, right? I'm doing this simultaneously on here, but I think I can do it just this way. Here's another thing. People assume that when you invite someone out of creativity, into creativity with you, it's really about that other person's creativity, that that's where it happens. And I have really done a lot of research into the reorientation of that thinking, which I think will be helpful. So this drawing comes from a writer named Ursula Le Guin. Do people know Ursula Le Guin? Really kind of a science fiction writer, really funny and eloquent. And she says this is figure one of how people assume communication happens. So there's box A and box B, and then they transfer information from one to the other, right? She said this is completely really not what happens at all. It's much more like amoeba sex. That's what she says. And I think, we all need to think about amoeba sex. So instead, it's an exchange that's happening. And right there is something new that's being created, right? So something is being created new out of the exchange of the listening and the telling. This is what she says. Listening is not a reaction, it's a connection. Listening to a conversation or a story, we don't so much respond as join in and become part of the action. That's my little bad drawing. I like to encourage you to feel as though you're all creative by my terrible stick figure drawings. So inviting and listening are creative acts in and of themselves. So also part of my journey in inviting people into creativity over the last many years, people with profound cognitive challenges, people just living on their own, just people who might be a little underconnected, we called it. Instead of lonely, we said, are you underconnected? Yeah, I think so. Because I think the other way to think about loneliness as why people resist it is because it's confused between an experience and an identity. And when people ask you, are you lonely? It sounds like, are you a lonely person? Like that is going to define who you are as an identity. And that is not how people would identify themselves. But I might experience this thing maybe in a cyclical way every now and then when the weather gets bad or seasonally or something. And when you think of it more in those terms, it's helpful because then you can identify, oh, it's happening again. Here's what I do when that happens, instead of being afraid of taking on a lonely identity. So one of the things that's happened to me in this journey is that my mother, I started out in my 20s doing this work. No one in my family other than my grandmother, who lost the ability to speak, really had this experience. And now I've been dealing with my mother, which has made a really incredible opportunity for both of us to teach each other how to be in this space together in caregiving, easing isolation. She will tell me, I am lonely. And I'll be like, okay, what do we do? How do we do this? And how do I use all of my creative skills to address it? So this picture comes from one day, and then also the improvisation skills. One day I went to go visit her, and we have this routine. I don't know how it started. When I was younger, she would greet people by saying, hoo-hoo, and then you'd say, hoo-hoo, back to her. So I come around the corner on her memory unit and I say, hoo-hoo, and if she responds, I know, how she responds, I know how she's doing. So I come around the corner and I say, hoo-hoo, she goes, hoo-hoo, and I go, okay, Mom, here's what we're going to do today. Let's go for a walk. Okay. Let's go for a walk, and every few feet I'm going to stop you and ask you to find something beautiful. Okay, let's do it. She has a hard time walking, so she has her magic nitro walker with the seat on it, which I want one. I think these things are awesome. So this is the first photograph of that. That's the second one. And then we would just talk about what's beautiful. She would trace it with her finger. She'd point to the colors, the textures. This, I don't know, I thought it was just a coffee table. No, Mom liked the curve and the thickness of it. This was just the upholstery on a chair in the lobby area, which, you know what, it really is beautiful. This is a really weird side table that she really liked. That was some plants. And she made me take that photograph 3 or 4 times because it wasn't capturing the light quite the right way. And so she wanted me to do it again. That one she approved of. This one, she specifically wanted that angle of the bowl from the top. Right? So it's like seeing in perspective and what is catching the eye. And then at the end, there we are. Right? This was so simple, and we were laughing. It was kind of amazing. And I think one we'll do again and again. So inspiration is everywhere. It can be really hard, particularly when you're working with people who might be starting to experience cognitive challenges, whether those manifest in challenges with memory or executive function, as Jeremy was talking about, that we learn to be able to meet the person without going back into who they were necessarily, but sharing and opening the moment as a way to inspire connection and meaning making together. And that is sort of has become a little bit of my superpower. Thank you, Grandma, for the bracelet. I'm going to invite you to do a little tiny example of this just now, which is just, and this room's actually, compared to some of the conference rooms I'm in, this room has some really interesting shapes. Just find something around the room that just draws your eye. Like, what shape draws your eye? Okay, we'll do that for a second. And for the people at home, look around the room at home and see if there's a shape in your room that draws your eye. Otherwise, you can do it, in the virtual world too. Okay. Well, I have to go with this thing over here. Take your finger and just trace that object with your finger. Okay, this is weird, I know. Bear with me. Now take all your fingers and trace it. Okay. Now your whole arm. Can you do it? Okay. Now, make it as big as you can, right? How big can you do this with your arm? Everybody has different ways, different. Okay. Now, one more. Pick a totally different part of your body. I'm going to use my head just to be extra weird. You don't have to get that weird. and outline it with that part of your body. Ready? Okay, that's weird. Feels weird. So one of the things I would do is invite people to turn to the person next to them and tell them which object they picked, and then show them, do it together, invite them to outline that thing with you. So you'll do two outlines, yours and the other person's, unless for some strange reason you picked the same object. Then you'll really just do one object, okay? So just a person next to you and outline that object together and tell them what it is. All right. Now, one more tiny little piece of this is just, if you can, just wordlessly together. Start, between the two of you, say which one we're going to start with, and then move into the second one. And then just do it together. You can do it with whichever piece of the body you want to do it with. I'm imagining mostly we'll use your hands. We'll go right to the conservative one. And then just move through it together. And I'm just going to, if you would, just take a second to try that. And then we'll watch each other, we'll have this section do it all at the same time, and then this section, and then that section. Because you guys don't get to see what I see from up here, which is that it's not funny, it's really beautiful, actually. It's really beautiful. So just take a second to practice it, moving from one into the other object. It really, really will never be perfect, so we don't have to worry about that. Do you want me to start over here? Are you guys okay starting? You guys are okay? All right, this section, ready? I wish I had music. I apologize. And go. Oh, we're so focused over there. That is amazing. That is amazing. All right, in this room, in this group, it's a lot of finger pointing. Awesome, thank you. And over here. All right. You guys, thank you so much for playing with me. I know it takes people out of a comfort zone a little bit. Tell me a little bit about, and I'll echo in case people can't hear, what did that feel like? What did that feel like? It was fun? It might have been torturous for some people, so I don't want to assume it was fun for everyone. It was a connector? Freeing. Perspective.
I thought having a partner made a huge difference. I know certainly not doing it alone, but having a partner felt like a performance and a connection.
So she said having a partner actually really changed it. That, when doing it myself, I'm outlining it. But then all of a sudden it became something more connected and unified and a different level for a partner. Anyone else?
I felt like we were learning to synchronized swim.
Like synchronized swimming, yeah.
The three of us actually all picked the same object. Well, a mask. We each picked a different mask on the bottom row than on the wall. So it was just interesting.
Right? Yeah. So sometimes it's amazing that you pick similar objects. Your eyes are drawn, and they are really interesting. So I give you that. Anything else? You can see, and look, I'm going to do one of those transitions from Dr. Noble's talk. You can see the making and the sharing and the reflecting process all inside of that, and how actually the sharing does something different. You could actually feel that and what it does. And he and I talk about differently because he's seeing it from a medical perspective. I see it as more in the social science perspective, which is something called social capital, which is that one of the things that happens when you fall out of the productive economic structure that is so valued in our culture, right? How do you make value? How do people measure your value? That's another reason why the arts are so powerful, and why I think that example of selling on Instagram resonates and it kind of vibrates as something interesting, is because we can make things out of nothing through the arts, and yet we're contributing something new. The definition of creativity is something new that has value, making something new that has value. And it doesn't have to be monetary, right? It can be something else. But by sharing what we make, we're back in somehow the cultural value sector. It's a creation of cultural capital, right? You're empowered and you make something that you can share with other people, right? That's a long conversation, but let's see. So 1998 is really the time that I started Time Slips, which people asked me about the name of the nonprofit, and it began with a grant project for a fellowship, and I called it the Interactive Intergenerational Storytelling Project with people with dementia or people with Alzheimer's and related dementias. And I used to joke, you can't answer the phone with that. It's not. So it was a permission that chronological order doesn't matter. In the emotional and symbolic languages that we were using, you could be in 5 places at the same time. That really wasn't about chronology. And so Time Slips became the name. And it's kind of poetic and playful, and people are like, what is that? So that's why I called it that. And over the course of the 25 years now, we've boiled it down to this little communication loop, which is that you open with a beautiful question. Yes, and is the root of improvisation, which drives the whole process forward. So yes, and is observing everything that's being given in a moment. So you're listening, you're watching, you're feeling, and you're adding to whatever is coming at you with a positive thing, right? So you're saying yes, and then you offer what's called proof of listening, which that is what I settled on. There's all kinds of different things about listening that you'll hear. Authentic listening, I don't know, deep listening. People add a lot of adjectives in front of listening. I call it proof of listening because you're demonstrating to the other person that they've been heard. And you can do that in all kinds of different ways. That's why I said it was like a master class with Nina, because you could tell she was adding something on, yet echoing what the person was saying, building off of what they're saying, making eye contact. What I train people to do is actually write down what's being said so that the person can, if they're having trouble with cognition and they can't hear very well, they can read it on their own time and correct it and change it. So the proof of listening is part of that cycle. And then the whole thing creates a product that demonstrates your commitment and value to that process. So something comes out of it and you make it into a book of stories, or you make it into, you write it down on a little index card, but you take the time to actually draw a little boundary, border around the index card, and you take care of that index card. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it demonstrates your commitment and the value of that creativity that's come out, okay? So a little bit more. The beautiful questions are questions, and this notion of curiosity, the way I say it is that it opens a sense of wonder. And wonder is you just don't know the answer. There is no right or wrong answer. It is something that opens your mind to wonderment. Again, no wrong answers. The yes and, accept what is given, add to it positively, and the proof of listening, echoing what the person is saying, writing it down, reacting and altering behavior. So just some examples. What is beautiful to you? That was the question I asked my mom in that moment with her nitro walker walking around the floor. Right now, what is beautiful to you? What shape in this room do you find interesting? You can see how I'm using beautiful questions all the time. So here's one that I actually open up to you to ask. Where do you connect to nature? Do you want to just talk to the person you were doing the weird shape with and ask them where they connect to nature? All right. And I'll pull us all back. I have another question. See, you can't stop once you start. All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to ask one more. I'm going to risk opening this up to you guys another time. Clearly it's working. Anybody want to give a little synopsis of where people connect to nature? Where did you connect to nature?
I said the lake, Lake Michigan.
Lake Michigan. Yep. Yeah.
Actually, well, when I opened up the door in the morning to take my dog out, fresh air, trees outside, smell of the...
There it is. It can be so simple, right? What else? Anybody else? Yeah. You're supposed to say what you... She wants you to say what you said.
I connect to nature at the Lincoln Park Conservatory.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's really...
We were talking about a variety of different areas, but they were natural, and we all agreed on the same locations, but when he said the Lincoln Park Conservatory, I said with not many people around.
Yeah, with not many people around. So it's like a little special place to you. I'm going to walk you through a couple more of these just to give you an idea of some of the beautiful questions that we've used. Then I'll tell you the systems that we've worked through. Whoop. When do you feel awe? And this is actually one of my favorite activities to do. When I give a talk, I'll start and I'll say, take out your phone and text someone that you know really well and just ask them this question. Don't explain it. Again, I love doing slightly weird things that kind of take people out of their comfort zone. And then put your phone on silent and then see at the end of the talk what people say. And it's so incredible to hear all the responses and and people say, good question, or who's this? Or, no, I'm just kidding. It's really a great thing to do. It's really fun. What gives you joy? Right? And the other thing you can feel inside the beautiful questions is that they're designed to build on strengths. They're inviting out expressions of strength. What gives or has given you a sense of purpose? I think we heard that. That could have been the talk, like the title of the last panel. And then how do you build on and evolve the stories? So if you asked, you can feel a little bit about what you could do building on the answers that come out so that you can get to that place where you're sharing. Make an ode to joy. If you get a list of all the things that give you joy, create a poem that includes all those things that you would call an ode to joy. And poems, just so you know, poems can be really bad. Poems don't have to be good. You don't have to, this funny thing, my grandmother, her generation would write poems all the time. And then suddenly somewhere along the line you had to have an MFA in order to write a poem. And I think we're coming back. It's really nice to see that people feel that it's just using words imagistically is a poem. That's really all it is. And you can really do it any way you want. For the question about awe, create an awe journal, right? Just take a blank journal, and what I did with my mom was I love index cards, blank index cards, and I just taped it to the journal front, and I put Sally's Book of Awe. I have a lot of Sally's books. And we just write down what fills you with awe. And then she can also draw next to it with some pencils that I left for her. I love creating miniature scenes and collages. You could do that for the scenes of nature. You can do that for a lot of different things, micro scenes that give you joy, or draw bad stick figures. That's another thing. Learning just little drawings of bad stick figures goes a long way. Layer stories with movement and sound. You had a little bit of practice on that. If I would have really dove in, the other thing you can do is stories by sound only. So just like I had you echo the space just with a shape, we could listen to this room and what sounds do we hear? And echo those sounds, and you make a soundscape for the room that you're in. That is actually really vivid sometimes in the neighborhoods. when you've got a lot of different sounds, bird sound, traffic sound, and things like that. So you can layer stories with movement and sound. You can do it alone, or you can collaborate together, or this is oftentimes where it's really incredible to collaborate with artists. We are all creative and have the capacity for this, but artists have an extra layer. They have an extra gear that sometimes can just bring our own work into this other level all entirely. And that is some of the stories that I'm going to tell you now. So this project, I did something very similar, working with a system that's really similar to Little Brothers in Milwaukee in 2014. After doing the Penelope project, in which we staged this beautiful play, it was a reimagining of Homer's Odyssey, and we wanted to see how we could bring creative engagement to people living alone at home. The first thing we did was study the systems. So what are the systems in place reaching people who are living alone and who might be underconnected? So we actually did ride-alongs with the meal delivery system, which is now our Meals on Wheels system. We had telephone well checks, much like you all do. So we studied that system, telephone reassurance program, companion visits, home care, and then we figured out where and how we could insert the sort of a creative feedback loop. How do you get the questions out? How do you get the answers back? How do you build on them and then share them back so that people know that they're part of something much bigger? So we designed these little cards that went out with the meals. We called it a little bit of extra nutrition with the meal. And so the meal drivers, we trained them in how we designed the questions. They helped us design the questions. They loved this because they were dropping off a meal and they really wanted to engage, but they only had, they had a lot of meals to deliver. So they're on this quick timeline. And what could they do? So if they didn't have time, they could ask the question, they could call an 800 number and leave the answer together, or the person could write on it and then the driver could pick it up the next time. So we had this whole art of a feedback loop of how to get the answers back. What you see actually here was then we shared it publicly this is the Milwaukee City Hall. It's this crazy, if you haven't been there, it's worth a road trip, I gotta say. Not something you'd normally think of. It's 8 floors of an atrium with beautiful wrought iron railings. My job was to dump all the questions out on the 8th floor, and I was a little vertigo up there, but we built a huge island, a styrofoam island down in the bottom with listening stations, and then we had these interactive card stations that had all the writing from about 3,000 different handwritten cards that people sent back. Really beautiful handwriting, so emotional to see people's effort in the handwriting on the cards. Here are some of the meal drivers, and on the handwritten cards we worked with an artist who could capture, I don't know how, it's a magic thing, again, through some software. You capture the handwriting, and then she took them all and put them on these posters that you see, and then we gave those back to the meal drivers so they could see all of the answers that came out as well. And here's some of the listening stations that we made, 20 little radio pieces out of the audio that came back from the 800 numbers. And then we also created these listening stations so you could hear people's voices. Again, 22 weekly radio segments, 12 monthly newsletters, 2,500 handwritten cards, and then the performance in the exhibit at City Hall. Here is a beautiful question that was used to prompt another project that I'll show you shortly. If you could look outside your window and see anything you wish, what would you want to see and why? And I'll just ask that of the whole group and have you just shout out something. What would you want to see outside your window? Anything you want. The pyramids. We're playing with imagination now. Anyone else? The ocean? On a calm day? Yeah, ocean. Doesn't matter. Just give me that ocean. Anything else? Anything you want.
Is it the Aurora Borealis?
The Northern Lights? Yeah, that would be amazing. I want actually the shutters that I can open one window and it's the ocean. There's the pyramids. There's the Aurora Borealis, right? You can have it all. All right. With this project, this happened, you can imagine we had done that project in 2014, so when the pandemic hit, we're like, we know what to do. We've done this already, all through the phone system, all through remote, through meal delivery, the whole thing. So we got a grant to do this and to do what we called telestories, so do these the beautiful questions by phone as well. And we used it all to build, we collaborated with artists because artists were all out of work as well, and they were all lonely as well in the pandemic. So we actually did loneliness scale research on both the elders that we were reaching out to and the artists, and both had a significant reduction in loneliness. And then we asked them to make something as a gift back for the people that they were collaborating with. And here is the little video.
Hello, my name is Phyllis. My name is Alice Cartwright. Yes, my name is Deborah Kraft. Hi, the name is Donna Jane Hampier.
My name is Philip Flagg.
My name is Janet.
This is Ernest.
What do you treasure in your home, and why?
Mainly memories. Also, I do paintings, art paintings.
Well, I'm elderly, and all my life I was a choreographer and dancer. So everything that I treasure in my home has to do with sculpture pieces and paintings of dancers and dance notes and anything to do with the dance career, costumes, that type of thing.
The area of my home that's special is my garden.
The living room, because I like to read there.
The area is my family room, where the family can gather to share ideas and thoughts.
My kitchen is special. This is where everybody always congregated.
The area that's special to me is my bed. What I like to do there is sleep, because sometimes I really have some fantastic dreams.
If you could look outside your window and see anything you wish, what would you want to see?
If I looked out my window, I would like to see a very large garden of roses, of all different kinds of roses and different colors.
I would like to see small kids around here again.
I would like to see some birds.
I like to see the birds.
Well, I really love birds outside the window, because my mother was a bird lover, and on her card, on the funeral card, she said, think of me when you see birds, and I do all the time.
What makes Milwaukee special? It's my home, the water, Lake Michigan.
What would you like to tell Milwaukee?
Pues solo gracias, a mí me ha tratado muy bien y espero que a muchísima gente le pase lo mismo. Para mí no le hace falta nada.
It's great. I love being here. I love the family feeling of Milwaukee.
I would tell Milwaukee County that I would not want to live anywhere else.
On my porch or on the road, I'm feeling like I'm always home. I'm always home. I'm flying up to heights a bird has never flown. everybody knows. There may be fawns, but there'll always be a rose. When I'm with you, I know I'll never be alone. I'm feeling like I'm always home. I'm always home.
My name is Gerda.
My name is Arlene.
My name is Millie.
Oh, my name is Angie. My name is Alice Cartwright, and I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. West Dallas, Cudahy, Wisconsin.
I'm calling from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
I'm calling from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
I love that ending when she goes, goodbye. I joke that really we should make this into like a Milwaukee promo, but that you wouldn't think that like people living alone, the older adults, would be the ones to promote Milwaukee like that. But I think you can see the power in that. What are we missing? And then I'm almost done here. When we fail to integrate creativity into care, and care is just friendship, right? Care is relationships. We miss the reduction of stress that we get from flow, from that making process. We miss the feeling of control when you know there's no wrong answers. You can actually say anything you want. You're shaping, expression, yourself. You miss social connection. You miss social capital and adding value to the world. You miss creating a sense of legacy and purpose. For both sides, remember I'm going to leave you with a terrible image of amoeba sex. I apologize. But it's a relational benefit, and we've said that all day. Or if a person is experiencing cognitive challenges and you're doing this in a group setting, it can also be good there as well. So we went through something terribly traumatic together, and it was primarily affecting older adults. And I feel really moved in emerging out of into whatever this next phase is. How can we honor that enormous loss that we've all just gone through? And I think it's acknowledging that everyone is creative, that we inviting and listening are creative acts. We see that inspiration is everywhere. We use beautiful questions, yes and proof of listening. We build on and share that creativity to create purpose and value. And we can actually then transform our lives and our systems by creating moments of meaning making everywhere. Every system. That system map that Jeremy had of health systems, cultural systems, libraries, it just needs to be everywhere. You, little brothers for the elderly, friends of the elderly, need to be in all of those systems. So thank you, and questions?
Any questions for Dr. Basting?
Or thoughts, responses?
Well, if anyone's had any thought after listening to this wonderful presentation that Dr. Basting isn't creative, you only have to look at her amazing shoes.
She loves my shoes.
They are really an indication of where her creativity starts, right from the bottom of her feet. I'm sorry, was there a question over here?
From the questions. What if you have someone that's not working? Like you're trying to make the connection and you're trying to have, where can you go from there? Or like how do you continue to develop questions in order to, connect with them more?
So where can you generate questions? Yeah. For the Islands of Milwaukee project, we had probably 80 questions. And just like, we're already doing that, right? But we're usually doing it about sports, weather, a really limited number. And so the 80 beautiful questions that we worked on with that project give you almost an endless supply of seeing what might work, right? And something as generic as, what do you hear right now? Or what are you seeing right now? What might be beautiful to you in this moment is so general that we've never really had any trouble as a starting point. There's, of course, people with varying abilities. So people might have low vision. People might have hearing challenges. And so you tailor, how you would enter a conversation with a beautiful question according to where people are. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Any final questions? Yes.
Well, it's less of a question, but more of like a thought.
Mm-hmm.
I just find all this fascinating, especially considering that Daisy and I, who's my home delivery coordinator, we've been trying to figure out like how to create these meaningful interactions with the clients we serve, since there are homebound adults. And I just find like these beautiful questions so fascinating. Like, how can we get that out of them and like talk to them more besides just like, how's your day? And like, what would you like to order this month? I just find it fascinating. And then also on a more personal level, my grandma has early dementia. And I've just been trying to figure out like other ways to engage with her, because my mom, on the other hand, she's more crafty, more of like this creative side. Everybody's creative, of course, but my granny is more of like, I just want to watch my TV.
Yeah.
So I've just been trying to find like ways to engage her, and I just love being able to do this with her now. So
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I say go where the energy is and use that as a prompt. So I would go right to the TV show and say, not unlike the Instagram story, tell me about this show. What do you love about this show? And let's tell the story of this show to someone else, to create a sense of purpose and a connection outside of the room. If we were going to write our own episode, what would we write? Let's make up a new character for this show, or you know what I mean? So if the energy is around the show, go right to the energy of the show. I also want to say I would never talk about anything except sports and politics with you. I know he's looking at me like, don't you dare bring that beautiful question into my room. And I'm like, I would never, because you love sports and politics. And I would just be like, that would be golden. But I'll tell you quickly about another, if you love sports and politics, and you can use them to engage in the larger world. One of the projects I've done a lot of different projects, and one was called Crossings, because a couple older adults were killed crossing the street. I mean, reckless driving has become really horrific. I don't know about down here, but in Milwaukee, it's terrible. And so we wanted to try to do a specific action to get the aldermen and the civic structures to make the streets safer for older adults and children, who actually are both the most vulnerable pedestrians, safer to cross. So we used creative engagement to do that. And we ended up making performances at intersections of 3 different municipalities based on a story that we came up with from creative workshops. In Milwaukee, we have these bridges that go up and down. So our performance was, when the guardrails go down and the triangles sound, then the bridge goes up. The cars just have to stop. There is no sneak in a turn, you'll end up in the river, right? You can't go, you just stop. And then the ship goes through, and then the bridge comes down and the guardrails go up. And that was it. We had these 10-foot PVC pipes with red striping on them for the gates, and we had triangles for the alarms, and we didn't actually do the bridge because it was too cumbersome. We tried. And then we made big sails and then walking sticks with sails on them so that we had a ship. And then we invited older adults and kids and all the civic officials to cross with us on the boat during the course just of the light so that we could get across. And I tell you what, having older adults and the mayor of each of these 3 municipalities crossing and not be able to cross in time gets the lights lengthened really quickly. The mayor of Cudahy was so panicked because Elaine was walking with her walker and he couldn't get across in time, neither could she, that he's like, what the heck's going on with these lights? And we had an expert there on the spot who said, these are they're under time. You need at least 15 to 17 more seconds for it to be standard. And it was great because there were 3 older adult apartments around that intersection, and they were taking vans to the grocery store on the corner because they couldn't cross at the intersection. So there's ways for you to use these things for political action as well. There's a bunch of really creative things being done around eviction, older adult evictions, which is really great work as well. So endless possibilities.